All right, folks, we are going to go ahead and get started. Good morning and welcome to the Advisory Committee meeting for the 2024 Resignation Buyout Program for Retail Sales Agents. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to attend this morning's meeting. My name is Nicole Blase and I am the Rules Coordinator for the OLCC. I'm going to just go over a few housekeeping notes before we get started. Today's meeting is being recorded. For those that are joining us virtually, which is everyone, please ensure that your phone or computer is muted unless you are speaking. Only invited committee members will be a part of today's conversation. Members were selected due to their level of interest or position within the community. With that in mind, we ask that each of you serve as goodwill ambassadors to the discussion so that you may represent your constituency professionally. Please be courteous to other committee members so that we don't have multiple participants speaking at once. You may use the raise hand function in Teams, or if you are calling in, please interject when appropriate and we will call on you in order. Non-committee members will be able to tender comments during the public hearing and during the comment period. Committee members, please state your first and last name when you make a comment. We're going to go ahead and get started. Today is Wednesday, June 26th at approximately 10:04 a.m. Many of you are familiar with the rulemaking process, but for those of you who have not yet had the opportunity, or for those listening in, I will begin by saying a few words about rulemaking and the purpose of advisory committee meetings. The purpose of an advisory committee is to increase the public's involvement in the drafting and development of administrative rules. The Oregon Legislature, through its enactment of the Administrative Procedures Act, ORS Chapter 183, stresses the critical importance of the public's participation in policy development. Advisory committees are an excellent way to solicit input from internal and external stakeholders who are likely to be impacted by the development or amendment of agency policy and rule. Consequently, advisory committee invitees may include licensees, permittees, industry representatives, OLCC staff, members of law enforcement, local government, the public, local community organizations, small businesses, and other interested stakeholders. The purpose of having all of the members on this committee today is to hear from different parts of the industry and our public health and safety partners. The Commission strives to hear from all interested parties. Our role today will to explain the background and context of these rules and the changes that are being proposed in this package. We will provide facilitation to ensure that all committee members can provide input today. As a reminder, under Oregon's public meeting law, this meeting is open to the public, and members of the public are free to observe our discussion, but may not offer comments. The agency will digitally record this advisory committee meeting and will produce and circulate a record of our discussion. However, because this meeting is intended to promote the open exchange of ideas, we will maintain an informal atmosphere, and meeting minutes will only record the topics discussed and the main points made. During this morning's meeting, we will seek your input on the proposed amendments to the 2024 Resignation Buyout Program for Retail Sales Agents. Liquor stores in Oregon have evolved from selling a narrow selection of non-spirit products to being more like convenience stores in terms of product selection. The buyout paid to an agent upon termination was designated to compensate agents for the goodwill they created related to their liquor business. Now, it is the desire of the Commission that store agents put some work and money into their stores to make them one-stop shops. Store agents are expanding their businesses to include non-liquor items ranging from beer to drinkware to grocery items. The current buyout process does not take this side of the business into consideration and needs to be updated. We will move on to introductions. Again, as a reminder, if I could kindly ask that everyone please put their microphone on mute. We're getting a lot of background noise, so thank you. I will be calling on you to introduce yourself. When introducing yourself, please state your name and the organization you are representing. Again, my name is Nicole Blase, and I'm the Rules Coordinator for the OLCC. And I'll start with Paul and have any OLCC staff joining us today introduce themselves.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for attending this important meeting. I'm Paul Rosenow, currently serving as the Acting Assistant Director of Retail Services, and I hope to be a good integral part of this process as we go along.
Thanks, Paul. Any other OLCC staff joining us?
I'll go next. I'm James McHugh-Badelsky, District Manager for District 6. I have Bend and Eugene area, a little bit of the coast, and also hope to participate in this and create something that everybody's going to be happy with.
Thanks, James. Anybody else from OLCC?
Good morning. Dave Owens, District Manager, OLCC Retail part of the business. I take care of the Southern Oregon region, District 2, so I take all of the Southern region of Oregon.
Great, thank you. Anybody else from OLCC? All right, I'll move on to our RAC members that I received an RSVP from. Salim, good morning.
Hi, good morning. This is Salim Noorani here. I've had a family tragedy this morning, so I just calling in to say I will not be joining the entire meeting, but hopefully there'll be some records that I could look back on and comment.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Salim. I'm sorry to hear about that, but we will have the audio recorded and posted, so you're welcome to revisit the meeting and of course chime in or give us comments, but please take care of your family. Thanks for joining us, Salim.
Thank you. And one other comment, are there
Sure.
going to be more than one meeting, or is this it?
It is possible we will have one later in the year. It hasn't been decided yet. We still definitely have a lot more information to collect for this. So if we do have a second one, everyone here, all of the RAC participants will be informed if we decide to have a second RAC.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks, Salim. Bye. Dan Miner.
Morning, Dan Miner. I'm an agent at 1182 and 1256 Hollywood Beverage. I've been an agent for a little over 16 years now.
Thank you. Tracy Brumbles.
Tracy Brumbles, Rainier, Agency 1052, current Vice President of the Also Association, and an agent for 23 years and counting.
Thanks for joining us, Tracy. Bill Hagee. I apologize. Bill, are you joining us today?
Yeah, no worries. Bill Haig, owner of Battle Creek store number 1198 in Salem. I've been an agent for just over a year and a half.
Thank you, Bill. Rick Bagri.
Hi, I'm Rick Bagri. I have a store in Southern Oregon in Klamath Fall, store 1080, and also store in Ashland and Jacksonville.
Thank you, Rick. Greta Karimi.
Hello. Okay, I'm here with my husband as well, Barry, and our first store Barry got in 1995. I currently own the 205 liquor store, and in the meantime, we had two other stores, Hillsdale and Lake Oswego.
Great. Thank you for joining us. Are there any other invited RAC participants that maybe didn't get a chance to RSVP on the call today?
Yeah, hi, this is Bill Halloran. I'm the agent at West Slope Store 1216, and I've been here about 9 years.
Great. Thank you, Bill. All right.
This is, Robert Boland. I'm the agent at 1096 Hillsborough.
Great. Thank you. Again, just a reminder, comments and discussion today are for invited RAC participants only. So if you're joining just to get more information or listen, that's wonderful. But today's conversation is limited to our invited RAC participants. So we are going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to turn it over to Paul, who's going to share his screen so that we can go over the draft proposed language that was circulated to the group. So take it away, Paul.
Thank you. All right, let's see if I can make this work here. You already see that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I think everybody received this copy via email, but we'll just go through it here just to outline the changes to the rule. This is Division 15, which deals with a lot of things. Basically, it relates to the retail liquor agents, and it talks about some buyout stuff and will enable us to make these changes. So the first is changing or adding to the definition of retail liquor store to, okay, thought I heard somebody, to add the related business, essentially to enable us to be able to encompass, you know, the chips and the gum and all the other things that you sell in the store to wrap it into the sale process. The big limiting factor that we've had so far in this is that we've not been able to take into account an applicant's financial ability to purchase anything but the distilled spirit side of the business. So this change right here is adding in the ability to include, you know, the value of the related items in your business. So this will let us put that in when we screen applications, because before we could only look at the applicant's ability to purchase the distilled spirit side. So this will expand that ability on our end. Calculating the buyout. So this changes essentially the 3-4% based on the evaluation to including consideration for fair market value, and that will include the distilled spirit side and related item side. It'll encompass both those, and it's essentially enabling us to work this process out and put it in the retail operations manual or agreement, which we're going to have to fine tune this, I think, as we go along. There will be some unexpected bumps, and putting it in the retail operations manual will let us fine tune this process as we go. And I think that is it. Those are the big enabling things that will let us make this process work. I think a lot of the work is going to come not through rule, but through the ROM and the contract. And that's where we can work out a lot of the details. Nicole, am I missing anything that I should go over here?
No, that's great. Thank you, Paul.
Okay.
So yeah, we can, if any other OLCC staff wants to chip in, but otherwise we can open the floor for discussion. Again, if you could use the raise hand function or just interject when there might be a break, and for everyone else to please remain on mute while we have others speaking. But is there any OLCC staff that would like to add or contribute to this before we open up the floor? Okay, discussion. Is there anybody who would like to begin? Dan, please get us started.
Yeah, thank you. On paragraph 1F, which I think is one that you highlighted first, Paul, is there a requirement in terms of the applicant's financial ability? Is there a requirement for upfront payment? As opposed to maybe some agreement that might be made where a portion of the business is purchased initially with a contract for future payments, which is not necessarily what I'm looking for, but I'm wondering if we should consider wording that requires upfront purchase.
Are you talking basically like a deposit? Is that what you're getting at?
Well, what I'm proposing is that the rule should require the upfront purchase, which gets to what you discussed in terms of evaluating the financial ability of the candidate agent.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. So are you proposing that the essentially the purchase takes place before the commission appointment?
No, what I'm saying is that once the new appointment is executed and at the time of the actual sale of the business, I'm proposing that we require that transaction to be completed as opposed to allowing for some sort of partial payment up front with a contracted payment schedule in the future.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Or we can have discussion on whether or not we think that that should be a piece of this.
Okay, good point. I think the one thing we have to consider is, and maybe it can be encompassed in what you're proposing, is there are times, unfortunately, that come up where agents do owe money to the state, that we have to take that into consideration. So we'd have to be able to calculate that first and, figure out amounts owed. And are you just referring to not, you not carrying a contract? It's just a complete cash deal. Is that what you're getting at?
In essence, but I'm interested in a comment from Bill or Salim, who have, I think, pioneered this process, and see if there's potentially value in having a payment option in terms of attracting potential candidates, or if it's in the better interest of the outgoing agent to require the completion of the sale up front.
That's a good question. And I don't have the answer to if we could facilitate a seller carried contract, just because I don't know, what treasury or fiscal or but we have to research it. I'm not saying it's a bad idea or couldn't be done. We just have to research it. I'm going to make a note of it.
All right. Anything else, Dan, on that one section?
I'm not sure if it fits in this section, but here again, Salim would be a good point of contact. But do we need to have any discussion on for agents that have multiple stores, and whether or not the transaction is for a single agency or potentially for multiple agencies?
I'll make a note of that too. I do think that we would have to post both, and that's, not saying we couldn't do that at the same time and recruit for the same time, and couldn't, the person could apply for both stores if they wanted to, but in the end, it all comes down to commission appointment. So I can see a situation where potentially, your buyer wants to purchase both of your stores and applies for both, but at the second store, there's a lot more competition potentially, and there's more qualified applicants that come into the mix. So I don't know if the commissioners would want to just automatically select the same person for both if there's somebody more qualified for the second one, if that makes sense. But I'll make a note of it.
All right, thanks.
Tracy, you have your hand up.
Thanks. So the back page 6, I think it's 11C. It says the commission terminates the resignation buyout program. The non-compete provision in section 10 remains in effect. How would the commission terminate the program, and how would agents be notified of the termination of that program? Would there be notice given, or is it just something they say, nope, no more, and we're done? What if you're in the process of doing the resignation buyout program, and then the commission just decides to blow the whole thing away? How are we protected under that?
I'll make a note of that. I would hope and I would think that the new way would be a lot more profitable to an agent who's outgoing, and they would want to do, what's being proposed here. And I think you'd probably get more money for it, but I think we need to develop a contingency if somebody is in that process. I think that it would continue course. I think this would be for new transactions going forward.
So the commissioners, if they, say that there's somebody in the process in July and then they decide, I mean, the way I read it, commission terminates the program and then they decide in August, no, we're not going to do this anymore, but your transaction hasn't been completed, or maybe you're thinking or have been talking through the steps. I just feel that there should be some type of a form of notification to the agents that program could possibly be going away.
Sure, and that's what this whole thing is designed to do, is to completely replace the buyout program, because I think we and most people view this as, you're going to get a lot more money for your business in the end with this new program. But I think you're right. We need to develop a contingency if somebody is in that process. I don't see it just, terminating what's going on. I think that would continue. But I made a note just to make sure we cover that loophole.
Thank you. And not to say that it would be a dishonest, but what if something happened like it did a couple years ago and there's commissioners, there's directors leaving right and left, and everybody is just left up in the air with not knowing what's going on. I think it'd just be good to have some verbiage in there to protect.
Sure. Thanks for that.
Thanks, Tracy. Does anybody else, any other RAC members, have feedback that they'd like to share? Not hearing any feedback. James, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted, because I'm listening to the meeting and trying to determine what's being decided here. And it seems like we're kind of building the framework, but actually determining the value is going to be another piece at a different time. Is that we're not coming to a conclusion here for that, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So typically with a rulemaking package, it can take, 3+ months sort of start to finish, but this is different because we do have that evaluation, third-party evaluation and procurement element. And so this is very much just a starting place. There will definitely be modifications to this language once we have more communication with procurement. So this is a starting place, but we definitely want any feedback that you have to share. I think we probably will need a second RAC once we have that information later in the year. So please feel free to, make any discussions or suggestions today, but we will definitely be revisiting this before final action. So.
Great, thanks. Thanks.
Yes, sure. Dan.
Yeah, so on Rule 15-0190 on page 4 of the handout that we have, paragraph 5, that first sentence, I think, implies my earlier point that the buyout has to be done at the date of the incoming agent. However, I don't understand the word "if" in that sentence because I don't think an outgoing agent could even entertain this if there's any doubt that the program isn't in effect.
I think you're probably right about that. And I think so I think the problem here is this is old language based on the old program, and there was some language about, if A or B happened, then the buyout program would not be in effect anymore. There was essentially a couple of triggers that could make it go away. So I think we need to evaluate what you're talking about here, this sentence.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Is there anybody else that would like to, any other RAC members that would like to contribute to the discussion? Rick, yes.
I didn't see this in the language, but what I was thinking, like when we're rulemaking, some kind of insurance for the liquor agents too, because right now it all depends on the coming agent, what they want to pay for the non-alcohol part. They can just take the liquor side and be done with it and tell you like, hey, I'm gonna open a store at the new location or whatever. How can we secure that they will buy the whole store instead of just the liquor part of the business?
Yeah, I can definitely address that. And Rick, I think this is something that's going to be addressed in the ROM and the contract. And I can tell you all the plan is we're working on our side with procurement to find solutions for appraisals. And in the ROM, it's going to specify, at least this is what the vision is, it'll specify that, you know, a qualified appraiser will be used to determine value of the entire business, not just your distilled, but also your related items. And that's the figure that will be used to calculate, you know, what you're going to get. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. And one more question on that side too. So when we're talking about this, are we talking about all the stores right now, or just the liquor stores, or the stores that have other attached businesses with it?
And that is definitely something on my list that we'll have to talk a little bit more about in terms of process. You know, does this apply to every single store, or are there going to be some one-offs that, or I shouldn't say one-offs, but, you know, a second tier that we need to take into consideration? So I appreciate that comment, because it is something we have to think about, because not every store is the same.
Thank you, Paul.
James.
Yeah, to my knowledge, I mean, the way things currently stand after the legislative action a couple of years ago, there are two paths for a store to change ownership. One is where the agent retires, which is kind of what we're discussing right now. The other is where an agent sells their business, not the liquor, but the other business, and we appoint a temporary agent. And then at some point in the future, we have to advertise and other applicants can come forward. So I guess my quick question maybe to Paul is, are we going to sort of do away with that second option, or is that going to be, are we going to have two paths as we have done?
You know, and that's a good question. I think there will always be a need in certain circumstances for a temp agent. And I think that if a temp agent comes in, I don't think it would be a whole lot different than what it is now, in that it's going to be posted publicly. And the temp agent would still have to go through the same process of, you know, showing their qualifications and the appraisal and all that. So I think it would, in the end, it filters out to the same thing. But I do think there are certain times where we'd have to have a temp agent come in just in tight circumstances.
Bill, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was wondering about the qualified evaluator. Would that be something the government would be paying for, or that would be something a buyer and or a seller would all have to bring to the table? Obviously, there's going to be more than one evaluation, because I'm sure the buyer is going to want an evaluation. I'm going to want my own evaluation when I go to sell, and I'm sure the government's going to want their own numbers to work with.
And that's something we'll have to work out. This group, you know, we'll have to work out as in terms of the policy or the process we put in the ROM or the contract. I think the want is to get a fair value that OLCC is going to procure a qualified neutral third party to do these evaluations. And I can see, you know, potentially that cost is split by buyer and seller. I don't know if the OLCC will have a budget to pitch into that. And I think if the agent or the buyer wants their own third party evaluation, that would be something that they would have to do on their own. And I don't know how much weight would be thrown into that in the end, but that's what we have to work out in terms of that process.
Dan.
And Paul, to that, point, paragraph 3 on page 3 that specifies that this whole process is contained in the ROM or the agent contract. I'm wondering if there needs to be at least some minimum parameters for the evaluation and valuation in the rule, because I don't think that the incoming agent is otherwise bound by anything in the ROM.
You're correct, they're not bound by the ROM, but they would be bound by the price set by the evaluator or appraiser. You know, that's what they'd have to pay to get into the business. But I
just think that there should be some limits or specifications in this rule. So, because I think the rule has more power, so to speak, more legitimacy than the ROM or the contract that the outgoing agent is under, and which currently none of us are under a contract that has any of these buyout provisions in it, other than the traditional legacy process.
Good point. And I've made a note of that so we can hash that out further.
All right. Are there any other RAC members who would like to provide comment or feedback today? All right, I'm not hearing anything. We did also send a fiscal impact and public health questionnaire to our RAC members in preparation for this meeting. Are there any fiscal impacts that any of the RAC members would like to discuss today? I guess it's kind of hard to forecast that when we don't have all the information, but since this is sort of open-ended at the moment, this rule package, if you decide later that you would like to fill out a fiscal impact statement questionnaire, please feel free to do so and send it back to me, and we will make sure that that is considered and included into the final rulemaking record. Anybody else that would like to contribute today before we conclude this very short meeting? All right.
Is there any opportunity for non-RAC members to ask questions?
No, this meeting is for RAC members only to participate. I will put an email in the chat for anybody from the public who has joined us who would like to provide comment or ask any questions. You're welcome to do so after the meeting today.
Well, I am a liquor agent that's looking at retirement, so I guess I'll go to the other forum then. Is that?
Yes. Again, you're welcome to contact us if you have any questions or suggestions. And then also, once we do file the notice of proposed rulemaking, which I think will be a little later this year, anybody is open to provide public testimony, whether written or oral, that will also be included into the final rulemaking record. But today's conversation is for invited RAC participants only.
Okay, so if I have submitted my resignation, I need to try to get that back. So I appreciate the information. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Okay, so we're going to conclude. I don't see any hands up. If anybody has any additional feedback, again, this rule package will take a little longer because we're still waiting on some information. So we have a little more time with this. So definitely let today's conversation marinate and think about additional comments or suggestions that you would like to see here. But otherwise, we are going to conclude. As I mentioned, there will be a notice of proposed rulemaking and a public hearing probably later this year. So everybody will have the opportunity to participate in that as well. And I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Hey, Nicole, real quick.
Thank you. And I'm gonna put that email in the chat really quick before I hang up, just so everybody has it. But thank you everyone so much for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody.